When I toured AU, one of the reasons I was so excited to be a student here is that it seemed so promising. It seemed like there were such nice level sidewalks and modern buildings. And I learned very quickly during orientation week that I was getting stuck.
Originally, I thought that me not receiving accommodations was like kind of my fault and that AU's ASAC was just not very accommodating. But in my senior year, I took a living with a disability course. And in that course, I studied alongside other students with disabilities that all had almost the exact same story that I had with ASAC.
I showed up the first day of move-in with my mom and the dietitian, and I went to the dining hall and I went to the station where they said I could eat food. And there was not a single piece of food I could eat. And I asked the chef to make me something in the back, and he said that they had already used all the food for that meal and that there was nothing on the entire campus that I could eat.
The building we're sitting in right now is not particularly great for a blind person. Yeah, the rotunda is real nice, but look at those stairs in the rotunda, those kind of slanted, those are terrifying. And at some points, the elevators go out. And I've had to navigate those steps.
During move-in week, my building, they closed down all the elevators for parts only. And so I had to fight with them every time I wanted to use the elevator to go up and down the floors. It was a little bit of a struggle simply because I have an invisible illness, right? You can't look at me and go, oh, she's in a wheelchair, so obviously she needs the elevator. Yeah. So I had to explain every time that, no, I need to be in the elevator. And actually, when I spoke to ASAC, ASAC was pretty upset about it because they're not supposed to shut down the elevators because I'm not the only person who needs to use them.
ASAC is a program that's meant to make it so that AU is accessible, and taking classes at AU is accessible, buildings are accessible, but unfortunately getting accommodations and communicating with people inside ASAC is not accessible.
You submit a great deal of formal documentation and you meet with staff members and they'll ask you clarifying questions about why is this accommodation a good fit for you, and maybe hopefully they'll approve you for it.
ASAC's been actually pretty positive for me. I know a lot of students have not had great experiences, but for me personally, I had a letter from a doctor that was very detailed and explained all of my steps, and they were able to very clearly understand why it needed to be implemented.
I think I ended up sending in 6 sets of documentation originally. I don't think that's effective on either my or their end. That's too much paperwork for anyone to be sifting through.
For my documentation requirements, I'm supposed to have documentation that proves that I have the chronic illness and disorder that I have every 6 months.
I started the academic accommodation process the day it opened, and it still took me weeks into the school year to finish the meetings.
The questions are very invasive, and the argument behind that is because they need to accurately assess whether or not you're a student with a disability, but medical documentation should be more than enough. I myself have never been able to make it through an ASAC interview without breaking down and crying because the entire process feels more interrogative than it does inquisitive.
I'm so tired of meetings. I'm so tired of being, as a student, feeling like I'm somehow the one who has to take this on and follow through and try to solve what should have been an expectation of equal access.
When we have been working with different members of ASAC, a lot of the responses that we get from them is that the responsibility falls on the student to be able to receive those accommodations.
I don't know what my options are. I don't know what it is that I can ask where I'm going in and saying, here's what I would like, and maybe they're redirecting me, maybe they're saying, oh, this is what's humanly possible, and I don't know until I've talked to another student that, hey, wait, there's actually this other much more appropriate thing to be asking for. I worry so much about the students who wouldn't have that advanced knowledge to know what they could be entitled to.
To speak candidly, AU has a lot of processes with intent to be really inclusive. But what gets lost in that is the humanness of it, the story of it, the emotions of it. And so I found that as a disabled student going through the process, I felt often like a number rather than a person.
How else does it make you feel?
Disappointed and a little devalued, I guess. One of the reasons I was so hopeful about AU is that it seemed so vocally committed to diversity and inclusion, and it seems as though committing to disabled students hasn't been a part of that.
Disability always ends up last at the table when it comes to discussions regarding human issues facing the AU community. I mean, that has bothered me a lot. It is getting better.
Undoubtedly, there are people who are very supportive of the disabled community on campus, but I would be remiss to say it was easy.
Honestly, I have had an overall good experience here. Again, I hesitate to speak for everybody.
My accommodation process as an individual didn't go through any of the proper channels of disability. But that being said, like, disability doesn't fit into a box. Disabilities are different and ranging, and even other people with dietary-based disabilities have had different experiences or need different things on campus.
I would say it's not ASAC this issue. I've had some teachers that have been less receptive to some of the resources that I need.
A lot of professors don't have adequate training for how to teach students with disabilities. So because of that, unfortunately, a lot of students are put in the position where if they do ever get the chance to be able to get those accommodations, they usually struggle with professors actually implementing those accommodations.
One of the things I need is I do get brain fog, so I need a recording device in my classes that is provided through ASAC. And I had one teacher get very angry at me and start yelling at me about not recording her in the class and inform me that I wasn't allowed to record her. I felt like from there on, like, she judged me differently for like explaining to her that I needed to have that recording device in class.
The entire idea of accommodations is not to make it so that it's like people with disabilities receive extra help. It's meant to make it so that it breaks down barriers that makes it so that people with disabilities can't access certain things.
I don't think I can get into the bottom floor of my own department building. There's no elevator or anything, and if I go wheeling down the side over like this sort of broken up parking lot, and I'm really careful about not tipping over into anywhere, there is a door through the bottom of the stairwell, but the door has the entire school year, at least the few times I've tried, always been locked.
I'm standing here outside of Hearst, which is notoriously one of the least accessible buildings. Hearst, as well as the East Quad building, are two of the least accessible buildings on campus. They either don't have elevators because of the age of their building, or their elevators are inaccessible. They're stair-based buildings. They don't have access to good ramps and things like that. So again, you know, students have had to request classes moved out of buildings, which is like an accommodation, but that's hard.
I was finding a class in Anderson, and then I had my mandatory Empower AU session. And so in the span of about 20 minutes, I got stuck at the end of a sidewalk. My friend had to, with me, lift my chair off of the sidewalk to get me off, or I was like toppling over. And then I went to this mandatory public session, got to the front of the building, went in circles around the building, and realized it was East Quad building only has stairs. And I just had to sit there with my friend until another student came by and we could wave them down and say, hey, please go tell someone, what on earth do we do here? I can't leave that sense that everything's been designed for people who aren't like me, and I'm just trying to find my way through it.
I feel like in the 21st century, at a school such as AU, we should be able to have basic facilities that accommodate mobility. We should all be able to move through campus freely and ably.
When I brought up the physical access issues I was having on campus, my, I guess DAA is the title, went around campus with me and went over where each issue was, and it wasn't like she was changing any of the sidewalk features, but she troubleshooted it with me. It's a little frustrating sometimes to realize how many more considerations I have going about my day than my peers do.
Remember that access involves a lot of different things. And sometimes the people that are supposed to make that happen are underpaid and overworked, and this is problematic. All of these things could use improvement, but again, we're trying to do it.
It's so hard to balance wanting to say that I don't hate AU as an entirety. I don't hate ASAC. I'm perfectly fond and appreciate that I do think that they theoretically care. It's just not adequately translating into my reality as a student.
The Disabled Student Union is a great place for people to meet others, to find other people who understand like fundamentally what it's like to be disabled. Even if your disabilities are different, we have this like shared common experience of like being disabled.
My primary responsibility is to work directly with the university, with ASAC, whereas the rest of our advocacy team is working to primarily help students in their individual needs. So a lot of what DSU does is advocate on behalf of students when it comes to professors, advocate on behalf of students when it comes to ASAC and when it comes to AU in general.
I spend a lot of time working with ASAC and DSU and really trying to build bridges between the two groups. But on the other hand, I'm also here to offer direct support to students with disabilities. I can help them through the ASAC process, I can help them figure out who to be talking to, or at the end of the day, I can just help by being a helping hand, listening.
I think there is a more concerted effort to make sure that students have what they want. I think this is a great thing. I think there are still many areas of improvement to be considered when it comes to accessibility where faculty is concerned. I was not intending, I didn't even know what affinity groups were until 2021, and I was sort of brought into the fold. You know, we have a plus in our name, Disability Plus. And I think that's pretty important because we tend to deal with disability as it intersects with everything else, so we tend to be a nexus, I think.
Disability solidarity is super, super important. So if you are a student with a disability on campus and you're struggling with receiving your accommodations or you're struggling with having your professors accept your accommodations, the place to go is definitely the DSU advocacy team. We have 2 out of the 4 members of our advocacy team. Their job is literally to directly help students with disabilities get their accommodations and defend them against professors. So those resources are available on campus, even if they're not available through AU or through ASAC. Those resources are available through DSU.
Getting to meet all of the people associated with the faculty and staff affinity groups and working with the Disability Student Union, and it's been an incredible experience.
I had a life-threatening reaction on campus. I was eating at the G8, now called Delicious Without Station, which is supposed to be free of my allergens. And a chef that day had made a last-minute substitution, and that had egg in it. And so I was served egg at a station that's supposed to be free of the top 9 major allergens, egg being one of which, and I had a life-threatening reaction. That really was a reckoning moment for me as a disabled person. And after that, I was kind of put between a rock and a hard place, and so that's when I reached out to DSU and I said, like, help? I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know what's happening, I don't know how to, like, eat the next meal, much less continue on as a freshman in college on the other side of the country from my family and my support network. And DSU was really there for me, and they didn't have any like tricks to, solve all the accommodation stuff. But at the end of the day, with a lot of hard meetings or not being able to really figure out my food or whatever it was, like I could go to them and be like, that sucked. And they were like, yeah, we got you, girl.
That was kind of why I got involved in DSU, was because to me, I felt like, oh my God, look at all these barriers that made it impossible for me to be able to get my accommodations. So there definitely has to be other students out there.
I think the importance of community cannot be overstressed, especially now when there is so much division and polarity. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a space, whether it's physical, digital, or both, in which to be the people that we are?
By embracing the term disabled, I have found a real freedom that I can talk in more powerful terms about what my experiences are like and what it is like to live as someone who is disabled. and how it's like to navigate systems here at AU as a disabled student.
If you have a space in which you don't have to justify yourself or try to come to terms with explaining what are perceived as your limitations to others. That's the thing about disability, is that we have to deal with what many others perceive as limitations all the time. But those limitations end up being sources of change and invention.
Disabilities range so much, right? We've talked about food disabilities, we talked about physical disabilities, but you know, there's learning disabilities, there are sensory disabilities. Like, disability is such a wide encompassing term, and you look at the community of people who can fit under this lens, and it's huge and beautiful and diverse, and that is a stunning thing, but it also makes it challenging to really accommodate.
I think a lot of the times the perceptions that people have with people with disabilities a lot of the times are physical disabilities, but that is excluding such a larger part of the disability population that it's when you're focusing only on people with physical disabilities, and oftentimes it's white people with physical disabilities, it makes it so that everybody else is kind of left out of the conversations that we need to be having about accessibility.
I think the university can work on being a more generally accessible place, right? What I talk about that, instead of, you know, aiming for accommodating one-off needs, trying to look at our systems as to how we can make them generally more accessible.
I definitely think a first step would be to have an elevator in every building. Making the elevator not just available, but in a place where you don't have to add in an extra 20 minutes to make a trip around to find it.
ASAC has a lot of changing that it needs to be doing, and the first step of that is by incorporating students with disabilities' perspectives in all of their decision making.
I feel like professors maybe need refreshers on interacting with students with disabilities. Professors feel like they are deserving of asking, like, why do you need this? Why should you have this? What's your condition? And that's not necessarily a conversation you always want to have.
I would like to see some medical training and some sensitivity training for all of our advisors at ASAC. And I would also like to see, like I kind of mentioned, a complete overhaul of the entire receiving accommodations and applying for accommodations process. Removing those barriers and making applying for accommodations easier, we're more likely to have students that will actually receive those necessary accommodations.
Some other things we're working on is making sure that ASAC is starting to collect data and being able to report out to students, like what accommodations get accepted, what get denied, where are the problems numerically with ASAC, do they have the staffing and the resources from the university, so that not only can we as DSU report out to our community of disabled students, but ASAC can also turn around and report out to the school admin.
I think sometimes, again, the knowing who to talk to exactly for resolving the issues that you have, that is something of a problem. Could there be one place, especially for faculty? For students, I think that is less of a problem. But for faculty, there's less of a process.
College is about this incredible experience, and everybody, disabled or not, deserves that. And accommodations make it possible. Accommodations make joy and laughter and friendships and learning possible. Accommodations enable that next generation of change makers that AU has set out to achieve and establish.
Often disability issues and their resolutions can help other people as well. What if good captioning helps people, let's say, who speak English as a second language? If we have the disability and related access issues sorted out, we might find that other people benefit from them.
Students deserve accommodations. Students deserve to feel like they're a part of a community. You deserve accommodations. You deserve to be a wondrous member of this community. And sometimes that's really hard to get there. And sometimes systems stand in our way, and we have to find the people at the root of it and have these heart-to-heart communications and conversations. But at the end of the day, you deserve accommodations. Everybody deserves accommodations.